Hi, everybody. It's Katie Harris, owner and CEO of NursePreneurs. And I'm really excited today because we have a special guest that's going to be talking to us about marketing, which is is everything. As Andrew likes to say, marketing is everything and everything is marketing. So Andrew coined that phrase. So I'm really excited to introduce you to Andrew Locke, who is owner of Help My Business, also known as the Yoda of marketing. I love that. So Andrew in 2008 developed the popular long-running web TV show Help My Business, which we could all use. And it's one of the most watched marketing shows on Apple iTunes. So Andrew, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, pleasure. Absolutely.
Now, I mean, you have a long list of stuff that we could talk about. You know, you also have 12 best-selling business books, and one of which, the latest one is Walt Disney's Way. So why don't you give us a little bit of background about you, and then let's jump into your Walt Disney book, too.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So originally, I was actually a TV cameraman. I was in the entertainment business, and I went from there to producing TV shows, and this was in England, of course, and eventually that sort of led me down a path of managing a very famous celebrity in England who was sort of like the Johnny Carson, I guess, of his day. And he had a show on the BBC that was syndicated in 43 different countries, not America, incidentally, but that sort of transition really kind of focused my attention much more on marketing, and I was just fascinated, actually. Excuse me. I was fascinated by it, and I just really kind of dove in deep, and sort of part of that was my the genesis, if you like, of discovering and learning about Walt, because you know, growing up in England, I of course knew the Disney movies, and I knew that there were Disney theme parks, but I never thought that I would ever get to go to one. And I was also quite badly bullied at school. And one day I was sitting in a doctor's waiting room, and I happened to pick up a Reader's Digest magazine, which you don't hear so much about them these days, but you know, I think most people will know what Reader's Digest is. And in this one that I picked up, so you know, I'm like maybe 14 years old or something at this age, at this time, was an article about Walt Disney, and I was just absolutely fascinated by his story. And you know, he had kind of a rough childhood that most people aren't aware of, and certainly was not born with a silver spoon in his mouth. But I really kind of just latched on to him. In fact, was fascinated, and I asked if I could take the article home with me, and I sat up in bed that night and read it through a couple of times. And I think I realized that I definitely had these sort of entrepreneurial qualities even back then. And it really sort of, you know, in parallel to my TV career, it really ignited my interest in Walt Disney specifically. And basically, I spent much of my life studying him and how he built the company, and you know, who he was as a person and how he did things. And he really genuinely was a genius in so many ways, you know, in much the same way that we might sort of say or put that label on someone like, you know, Steve Jobs or that type of character, you know, maybe Oprah Winfrey, or you know, someone of that caliber. He really understood not just people, but he understood what it takes to be successful in business. And a lot of people sort of didn't really see that side to him. You know, they just saw the success of the business and you know, the movies and so on. But there was really a foundation of an understanding of marketing, you know, at the heart of it. So I just found it fascinating to look into that.
Yeah, and I'll say this is completely random, but my son did a school project and chose Walt Disney as
Oh,
the person.
really?
Yeah.
Oh,
So I
how
actually know a
interesting.
lot about Walt Disney.
Yeah. How long ago was that?
That was just last semester, like
Really?
June of
Oh,
this
yeah. I'd love to talk to him about it.
yeah, well,
That's fun.
he's
Wow.
10. I'm not sure he wants to
Interesting.
talk
Yeah.
about it, but
Mm.
but yeah, it was fascinating because Walt Disney really was. I mean, he certainly didn't get it right the first or the
Right.
time for
Right.
that matter. Like he had he struggled quite a bit, and I think it's
Absolutely.
something that everybody can resonate with, especially now if they've started their business or they're thinking about starting their business. You know, marketing's always kind of the
Mm.
afterthought, and
So true.
yeah.
Very true. Yeah, he there's so many aspects to him that are not kind of widely known, but one that you just mentioned there is certainly comes under that category that even at school he was widely criticized by his teachers. When he had his first job, he worked at a newspaper, and basically the editor of the newspaper said, you're never going to amount to anything. You can't kind of focus. Your cartoons aren't very good, and all of this. And so, despite all of that, and despite having several bankruptcies early in his career, he really did have this strong belief in what he was doing and why he was doing it. And he also had stubborn persistence. And those are really important qualities when starting any business, because it's hard. It's much harder than most people realize. And a lot of people give up too soon. I liken it to pushing a big kind of Indiana Jones style boulder up a hill. It's really hard to begin with, but eventually, if you do persist with it and it's a solid idea, and you've done your due diligence and so on, you do reach the point of the crest of the hill, and then the boulder rolls down, and then it's like, oh, you reap the rewards. It's like, oh, this is a beautiful thing to have your own business, but it is harder than most people realize to get that going.
So, what is the name of the book?
The name of the book is Walt Disney's Way. And I'm thrilled to say it's actually become the best-selling entrepreneurial book about Disney. So yeah, it's. I mean, there was a lot of work to write it. I spent about between 3 and 4 years overall in research and development, and I really kind of wanted to go in a different angle. But yeah, it's been very well received.
So, what was the different angle that you took?
Well, most of the books out there, they either talk generally about Walt's life, kind of like an anthology or autobiography, that kind of thing, where it's more factual, event based. Or there are some books there that are more corporate based that look at the Walt Disney Company and make sort of lessons from what the Walt Disney Company has accomplished, more on the corporate side of things. But there was nothing out there really for the entrepreneur or the small business owner. So what I was able to do was directly distill the lessons from Walt himself, because he was really the foundation of everything that followed right up until today, and adapt those lessons for small business owners, because obviously it's a very different. Most people aren't running a theme park or movie business, so it's necessary to adapt those lessons rather than directly adopt them. That wouldn't be practical, but through adapting them and saying, here's the underlying principle of what Walt did and why he did that, and then here's how you can apply it to any business, including being a nursepreneur, as you call it. So that's basically the nature of the book.
So, what were some of his principles?
Oh, so many things. Let's look at one example of always focusing on how your decisions affect your customers or clients, or however you want to call them. You see, most businesses today, and I see this trap all the time with big businesses, with small businesses, everywhere in between. What they tend to do is, they have their meetings and so on, and someone comes up with bright ideas. Let's do this, and that will make it easier for us. That will generate more sales or whatever it is. They tend to be inwardly focused in making decisions. But Walt was very careful to always think, well, if we do that, how's it going to impact the guest, as he liked to call it, which as another lesson in itself we can come back to if you like. But he called everyone a guest because he sort of had this vision of, treating everyone like a VIP, rolling out the red carpet, as it were. They weren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. But one great example of this in action, of him focusing on the guest rather than on the business internally, was very shortly after Disneyland opened, which Walt directly designed and supervised the construction of. And he loved spending time there after it opened. He was walking the park, as he did one day, and a gardener came rushing up to him, and he said, "Mr. Disney, can I show you something?" And he walks him over to this area in front of the big Cinderella castle in Disneyland. And he says, "Look at what the guests have done. They're walking over this garden and, even trampling on the flowers to stand over here to take a picture of the castle." And he said, "We need to put up a fence here to stop them doing that because it's messing up the lawn and the flowers." And this is so interesting. Walt's response, without a moment's hesitation, Walt says, "Oh no, the people are absolutely right. The guests, that is a great place to take a photo. What we need to do is build a path to that spot." Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That was his thinking. It was always, well, why has the guest done this? What's going to be best for the guest? The gardener, obviously, he wasn't wrong to be protective of the flowers and to be frustrated, but he was so focused with his job and the results of that job, that he failed to see or to think about, why are those flowers even there? It's for the guests. So if the guests want to take pictures of the castle, then let them, so build a pathway there. So isn't that great? I love that story.
Yeah. And what I like about that too, or, really is that it's a good lesson to remember that when you start a business, we all think it's like our baby and, we're going to create it the way we want it and stuff, but your business has nothing to do with you. You're building it for the guest or the client or the customer, whoever. So the business has to adapt to what they want. And if they want to walk across the flower bed to get to the castle for a great picture, then you have to be flexible enough to give them what they want. Your business is there for them.
Absolutely, yeah. It is a great point. I always remind people that business owners, you are not your customer, and invariably our thinking as business owners is very different to our customers. So it's so important to get into their minds and think, what do they want? Not what do I want to give them? What do they actually want?
Yeah, I struggled with that in the beginning because I kept giving people what I thought they needed, which is never a good thing. And they kept saying, I want this. And I was like, well, why do they all want that? But, finally I, started, answering that type of stuff. And it made a huge difference. It's not what I originally thought of, but, once you open the business, you have to be flexible enough to pivot.
That's it. Yeah, very true. I made the same mistake too. It's very, very common. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're right. You're not your own customer, and you have to give them what they. I just had a conversation with a nurse about this yesterday because she's really interested in nurse burnout and that kind of stuff, and she's trying to sell solutions to nurse burnout. I'm like, nobody wants it. That's not what they want to talk about. They want to talk about like hemorrhaging staff. All right, so. One of the things that you do talk about in your book is making it easy for the custer to buy, or the guest to buy. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, again, so many examples. And, this is another sort of insight into Walt's thinking, because he really blazed a trail in so many ways of that we see other companies adopting since his time. But One example of this, again, he always had in mind, how can we make it as easy as possible for the guests to make purchases? Because at the end of the day, a huge percentage of the revenue from the theme parks is actually from the merchandise. If you visited one of the parks, that's no surprise. They do it very well. But one idea,
$20 balloons.
yeah, that's right. One idea that Walt had was to remove all the walls from the stores that line the main street. So as you walk down Main Street towards the castle, there's lots and lots of different shops on either side. And of course, the typical thing to do would be to have those as individual shops or stores. But what Walt said, well, let's take down all the walls between those stores, and then that way people can just naturally drift from one store into the other, and maybe they see something that they had no intention of buying, but they just stumble across it. And it had the other benefit too of when there's lots of crowds or when there's rain in the park, it basically opens up another way for guests to funnel through that area. So it was many benefits, but the biggest one was making it much easier for guests to buy. Another example on that same topic was they had the Disney executives realized that many guests weren't making purchases of large items. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me, I've got some allergies. The guests weren't making purchases of large physical items simply because they didn't want to carry them around, which makes sense, right? When you start looking at it and you ask people, hey, I saw you were interested in that, but you didn't buy it. So what Disney did was they implemented a system where either the store will hold the item for you until the end of the day and you can pick it up, or they will deliver it to your hotel room, which is even better, of course. So again, it comes back to that principle of take out the barriers that are causing people not to buy. So again, if we look at the underlying principle of that, that fact, making it easier for people to buy, we might ask ourselves, do we only accept credit cards in our business? Or, maybe some people would prefer to pay by PayPal, for example, or Venmo, or even crypto these days. Our brain may just think, well, I just want to accept credit cards. It's the easiest thing. But you may well be not, you may be missing a lot of sales by not having these other channels open, or vice versa. Maybe you only accept cash. Some airlines do that now. Some only accept cash.
Really?
On board, yeah. Some only accept credit card, and it's so confusing for the customer. Yeah. Why eliminate a method that people want to pay with you? It's their preference. So let them,
I had a woman recently, I contracted with their services, and she wanted me to mail her a check. And I was like, oh, I don't have a stamp. I don't have an envelope. Like, I don't have a mailbox.
Yeah. And the time and the hassle, I totally agree with that. I can't remember the last time I wrote a check. Some businesses have an arbitrary minimum purchase amount. Again, it's for their convenience. Why would you stop people from buying from you? They may, even if you lose a little on one sale, the idea, of course, is to help them to want to keep coming back. So it's very short-term thinking. Same thing with forcing customers to register before they can check out. That's a huge pet peeve of mine. When I go to a website and it says, okay, now create an account. It's like, I just want to buy this thing. Why do I have to create an account? And, you're asking for my birthday and all this information just to buy this simple little thing. And, sometimes I'll click away because it's so much hassle. Just let me check out, so have the option. If you okay, it's fine to give the option to create an account, maybe for people that know they want to have repeat purchases, but let people check out as a guest, if you're going to do that. So these are the kinds of things that, we can adapt to these, the underlying lesson, the underlying principle here.
Yeah, we actually just had that conversation, especially in IV hydration, because one of the things that we do with the systems is they come, they click on the button, and then, the question is, do we collect a credit card right then and there? And the argument is, why would you put that barrier up? Because maybe they don't know you, they don't want to put their credit card, they don't need to charge. So you're deterring a sale by doing that.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of psychology to this.
Yeah, no, definitely. I want to go back for 1 second just to talk a little bit about, I never really thought about those walls and how intentional that was. Like, I love, I've been to Disney so many times and love it down there, but love walking through those shops, especially the last time I was there was August 2021, and it was brutally hot, and the stores are this refuge, and you can walk all the way down, and it's it's really hard. It's like going into Target. You can't go in.
So many shiny objects.
Yeah. So, look at that T-shirt. That I could use that, and I could use that. But that intentionality, I think, is a big lesson. And also thinking about those walls coming down. If we think about some of our IV hydration, med spa businesses that they have, like really kind of getting into an area where the walls do come down. Like maybe you come in, I just saw something like Solace franchises where they collect, people of the same type of business, like IV hydration, med spa, integrative health, functional med, all that under one roof. And it's really powerful to, think like that.
Absolutely. As you say, it's always, the big thing about it is to make it intentional. Most people, they're so, in England we say blinkered vision. It's they sort of have these blinders. You say.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was going to say I don't know what that means.
Yeah, like a horse, where you just don't see these things. So that's why it's important from time to time to take a step back and see the bigger picture and start to look at all of these types of things.
Yes, absolutely. All right. So now you also talk about invention versus innovation. What's the difference between those?
Yeah, it's interesting. Very similar sounding words, but really so different. And Walt, again, understood the key difference here, that invention is really the process of coming up with something that's never been done before. It's completely new. It's literally an invention. Something has been invented that has never been done before. It doesn't relate to anything else. Whereas innovation is building on something else that someone else has done, but with the intention of making it better. And throughout history, it's interesting to sort of analyze this, because what you find is that in the vast majority of cases, inventors are basically the pioneers. They're the ones with the arrows in their backs, as it were. If you think about, for example, who invented the MP3 player, most people would probably say Apple, but that wasn't the case. They innovated it. Someone else invented the technology, and that took an enormous amount of work to create that type of the file compression system and so on. But Steve Jobs saw that and thought, imagine having 1,000 songs in your pocket. And so they built on that invention with innovation and made this incredible small device that was a game changer. That's innovation. And exactly the same thing happened with Walt. He didn't invent anything. He didn't invent movies. He didn't invent the theme park. The theme park already existed in Denmark. It was actually a place called Tivoli Gardens that was around in the early 1800s, 100 years before Disneyland. Oh, wow. And if you go there, it's still there today, much, much smaller than Disneyland. But if you go there, and Americans who visit, they invariably say, hey, this is just like Disneyland. But they don't realize it predated. Walt basically got tons of ideas from this theme park, but innovated on it, made it bigger, better, added more shows, attractions, added this and that, and made it what it is today. It's the reason why most people, Disneyland is a household name, whereas Tivoli Gardens isn't, even though it's still there. So innovation is where the real opportunity lies. And you've done a great job with that in coaching nurses, because you didn't invent the concept of having a nurse building their own business, but what you were able to do is innovate systems that nurses can use and plug themselves into to avoid making all the classic mistakes that they would do if they tried to do everything on their own. So that's innovation. And we want to be careful not to fall into that trap of inventing something new and finding, either we quickly go broke, or there actually isn't a demand for this thing that I spent so much time and money and effort trying to invent.
Yeah, I've had a couple nurses that have invented products that they brought to market. Well, at least the ones that I've talked to, they have actually worked, but it's taken years and hundreds of thousands of dollars for them to get to the point where they were. And I'm like, oh God, I just don't know if I had the stomach for that.
It's a hard road to be an inventor. It really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the innovation, one of the things that I like to do is look in other areas outside of business, outside of nursing, to see what people are doing, because you can extrapolate so much from other industries. Yeah.
I've found that to be the case. In fact, one of my mentors made it's such a simple thing, but he told me years ago, when you go to a magazine stand, or news agent, as we say in England, every once in a while, buy a completely random magazine that has nothing, you're not interested in the topic, but just force yourself to buy a few of these magazines. And he said, I guarantee you will get ideas for your business from a completely different business. And you know what? Every single time it's right. So to your point, there's so much to learn from looking outside our own businesses. We're, again, people doing such great things, innovating in wildly different businesses. So I love to hear that you do that. So much to learn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, that Solos franchise was one of them. I was like, oh, real estate, not corporate, it's commercial real estate, right? And it's all these different businesses together. So it's a real estate kind of purchase, and then you house all these different. I'm like, oh, we could do. I mean, that would be cool to do with. So then it just started getting my wheels turning about different things that we could do with our own groups.
Brilliant.
But yeah, no, absolutely. That innovation piece is really powerful. All right. So, I mean, Disney, he certainly had a lot of success, but he also made a ton of mistakes. So can you talk about some of his mistakes or Disney's mistakes?
Yeah. So many, actually, over the years. Again, and I think this is important because, even with ourselves, I think, when you have a certain presence in a marketplace, as we do, it's very easy for people to look at us and only see the success. But the reality is that success is very much a zigzag journey. It's not a straight line to success. And every entrepreneur, every business owner can tell you countless horror stories about things that have gone wrong, disasters. And the same is true of Disney. One very simple one that they realized in the mid 1980s. So bear in mind that, Disneyland opened in 1955, and then Disney World, or Magic Kingdom in Disney World, opened in 1971. It wasn't until the mid 1980s that they realized, under the helm of Michael Eisner, who was the CEO at that time, that they had lost literally billions of dollars by not having hotels at Disney World. In fact, they opened with 2 hotels, but when they actually did the sums and they looked at, where are people actually staying, and they were like, oh my goodness, if we'd have built more hotels here, that we literally would have made billions of dollars just like that easily. And so today, believe it or not, there's 35 resorts in Disney World. Within Disney World, it's 43 square miles of property, 35 different resorts, all different price ranges, with more than 30,000 rooms to choose from. So again, they've been running the company for decades before they realized that discovery. Another one that actually surprises a lot of people is that Disneyland in California, it wasn't until, or let me phrase it another way, until 1985, again, mid-80s, Disneyland was closed every Monday and Tuesday.
Oh my God.
So they thought, so the reason they closed it was to do maintenance. So they thought, well, we need to do maintenance, which is absolutely correct. And so they thought, well, how do we do maintenance? Well, the easiest way, let's just close the park for 2 days a week. So, when you look back, it just seems so stupid, but they literally lost hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And so, it wasn't until someone pointed this out, well, yeah, it would be more expensive to do revenue at night, but why can't we do revenue at night? Or why can't we close one ride at a time and do renovations and repairs and so on, while the park is still open? So, and then they're like, oh yeah, I guess we could do that. So, it raises the question for us, what old or established or traditional practices are we still doing in our business that we haven't even thought to challenge in years, because it's just the way that we do it? It's a good question for all of us.
Yeah, actually, it's a question nurses ask themselves every day in the hospital setting or healthcare settings, because we do a lot of antiquated. Well, that's how we always did it around here. But, coming out of that system and moving into your own business, I think it's really, really important to ask, why am I doing this?
Yeah, very true. One final example of mistakes too. This is kind of a fun one to think about. For all of Michael Eisner's successes, and he had a lot of innovation, and he definitely was overall a very good CEO. But one major kind of blunder was, for many years, he insisted that the company spend money developing a Disney car, a car that was themed around Disney. He felt, well, that's a surefire winner. Cars are a big business. It would be extremely popular, and probably would have been. But this is the point here, that we sometimes just fail to see the obvious in our own business. Eventually, after they'd done all this work, designs, and spent loads of money developing the perfect Disney car, when they finally got it to a point where they brought in focus groups to discuss it and show them all the designs and so on that they were proud of, and isn't this the best thing since sliced bread, and don't you think it would sell really well? Interestingly, girls were very enthusiastic about it. They were, the Disney princess themes and all that. But interestingly, young boys said they didn't like it at all. They didn't think it was cool. But the most important insight was that parents said en masse, well, what would be the perception of Disney whenever one of these cars is involved in a crash, especially if it's, involves a loss of life, which is, of course, inevitable. It's a car, And so immediately Disney executives were like, why didn't we think of that? Having that kind of news associated with the Disney brand would be terrible. It absolutely is a terrible tie-in, to have that with the Disney brand. And immediately they were like, there's no way that we can continue this. And so all that money was completely wasted and down the drain. And it took people completely outside of the business to point that out. But it was so obvious when they did point it out.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk might have a few things to say about that too.
Yeah.
Every time his self-auto driving
right.
gets into an accident, it's like
true. It's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that brings up a good question, though. Like, I mean, how do you know when to kind of give up on an idea versus if you just stay in there a little bit longer and push on?
Well, I think ultimately it is important to do due diligence. Some people are stubborn, but they're stubbornly wrong. And so I really am a big proponent of and encourage people who are thinking about starting a business to, first of all, establish that there's demand. So, even just using Google, are there similar businesses out there already? Do they seem to be doing well? These days we're at a point where really every type of business has been attempted, and you'll see kind of, examples and parallels, even if it's not, directly in the exact thing that you want to do, you'll see something that's close enough. And so it is, rather than just sort of jumping in with 2 feet blindly, not being aware of whether there is demand or not. That's really, really important. And the other thing associated with that is, are people willing to spend money on this thing that you want to provide? Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. And, it's always a warning sign if it's only seasonal, which some businesses are, because that's going to severely limit you.
It's like being off on Monday and Tuesdays.
Right. Exactly. So really just doing adequate research beforehand before you dive in, so that when you do dive in, you can then be confident that stubborn persistence will pay off. And of course, finding your own unique selling angle as well, your USP, as we say, is very important. You don't want to just look at what another business is doing and say, oh, I'll do that too, because well, then you're just directly competing. Whereas if you say, there seems to be a gap in the market here, as I did with my Disney book, no one else has done a book on this specific angle. That's where you want to be. That's where the gold is in any business.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point. Like, so first, you definitely want to be in a business that actually has competition, because if you're the only person out there selling, I mean, either you're really, really ahead of everybody, or you're just,
the competition is a thing, yeah.
It could be great, or it could be just a complete disaster. So you have to tread carefully there. So, but if people are actually paying for what you want, and I think IV Hydration and Med Spa are 2 really good examples, because there is demand out there. But I mean, you don't want to just come in doing the same exact thing that everybody else is doing. Like, what is your unique special angle that you're going to take on this? What are you going to really kind of showcase as what you do is what is special. So.
Yeah, very true. In fact, I was just walking through, I thought of you the other day because I was walking through JFK, the Delta terminal. I don't know if you've been there, but humongous. I mean, it's their flagship terminal. And as you come out of security, on the left-hand side, there's a new med spa there that's offering IV hydration, vitamin B shots. And I was fascinated to see it, and how they're doing the marketing and so on. So when I see something like that, it's clear that there is mainstream demand for it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, Andrew, this has been amazing. Can you tell everybody, one, if they're interested in getting in touch with you, how they can get in touch with you, and also where, if we want to buy this book, where can we go?
Yeah, thanks very much. That's kind of you to ask. So yeah, feel free to reach out to me if anything has resonated with you in this talk today. My email is very simple. It's Andrew at helpmybusiness.com. I love talking about Disney, of course, and all things marketing. So, if you've got an event or something and you're looking for speakers, I'd be happy to do that, or, an interview. And then for the book, you can certainly find it on Amazon. It's again, the title is Walt Disney's Way, and that's probably the easiest way to find it. I do have a link to I think it is the Walt Disney book. Yeah, the WaltDisneyBook.com. If you go there, and if you get the book on Amazon, then I'll give you a free audio version, which is me reading the whole book. So if you prefer to listen, just grab the book on Amazon, and then there's instructions on how to get the audio version at thewaltdisneybook.com.
Yeah, I just put that link in there and tested it. It does work, and it'll take you to the right place. So, all right, Andrew. Well, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Always fun to talk about marketing and and so on. And congratulations for all your efforts in the NursePreneur space.
Thanks.